It's been a whirlwind 12 months for Chicago band Nachtmystium. A lot to really talk about in regard to that, but really at the cornerstone of all of this is the new album that they just released, that just came out, that for a long time, many fans, including myself, and probably you if you're viewing this video, thought that it was going to be their last. The world will be left behind by this group. Now, Nachtmystium has been a cornerstone part of this channel as well. We've covered a couple of their different albums, most notably one of the very first kind of pet projects that I took on, which really is not one that's probably very well known by many of you in the coverkillernation, was my covering of the black metal idea. And I actually encountered the black metal triptych, or created the black metal triptych, based around this idea, as well as the album Metal from Pink Floyd and another album, a Neurosis album. And that triptych actually brought up really an evolutionary point that metal itself began whenever it came to psychedelia, whenever it was released by Pink Floyd a number of years ago, and then of course moving in a forward fashion toward the present, though not in that order with the videos. Though with this band there have been numerous reports about them breaking up, and then Blake Judd made it official. And then there was some legal controversy with with a theft charge and an arrest, and he himself trying to get clean off of drugs, most specifically heroin. Now I state that this has been active, considering that seems like it's very cut and dry, based around the fact that just recently Blake has announced that he would really enjoy the idea of reviving the project. He doesn't have any plans for it currently. However, he's done everything in his power to ensure that he himself is getting clean and, well, all of that fun stuff. I'm sure that that has not been easy. But now let's get to the meat and potatoes of things. Let's get to the real reason why a lot of you are probably here. Not to hear me give you a history lesson that you could easily Google or Wikipedia. Instead, one that speaks purely about the music that's encased within this curious final album. Final album, of course, being in the air quotes, because we're not really too sure. 9 tracks off of this disc, one that encapsulates more than 56 minutes of airtime, and certainly one that seems to have some curiosities to it. In the past couple of releases, with Silencing Machine being the most recent, prior to this one, should I say, there always seemed to be something about what this band did that made them just seem endlessly not only creative, but it made them very intriguing as a group. Really, it was almost becoming a what are they going to do next type of deal with this group, because they seem to be sonically moving past the idea of traditional black metal and instead just meddling around, as really the album titles would suggest, with black metal, and really creating some new atmospheres, to the point where many people felt that they could easily coin Nachtmystium as a blackadelia band, if you wanted to, really go down and deep and compartmentalize exactly what the band is. In reality, they're just a group that started off as a, raw black metal band, and decided to expand their own horizons and not pigeonhole themselves. And you kind of have to give them a lot of credit for that. Even if you're one of those die-hard guys that feels that this is some sort of vicious betrayal to their black metal roots, you have to understand that bands sometimes need to, do something for themselves, evolve their sound a little bit, and if they want to do that, that's their creative liberty. Is it a slap in the face to the black metal community? No, it's actually something that's helping to expand the genre and actually give it a little bit more dynamic flavor. With this album, however, I feel as though there's a very personal tone to it, and it's one that's certainly centered principally around Blake's own drug addiction and own real lifestyle depression, and a lot of things that have gone on that have really worn him out, worn him down, and beaten him to death. And a lot of them, of course, whenever you mention, a drug such as heroin, is very much self-inflicted. You hear this a lot in the lyrical content, and really in some of the ways in which the songs are constructed. These are songs that feel very much almost like he went into a studio and decided to open himself up. He left himself exceptionally vulnerable during the writing sessions for this album, and it definitely shows. Really, whenever you consider some of the song titles that this band, Nachtmystium, have put out within the past couple of years, you can definitely sense an arc of, depression, and also an arc of drug abuse that certainly exists. It's no longer one that's just borderline fancified because of the whole, Pink Floyd thing and the, common misconception that they were fucking high as shit whenever they wrote every fucking thing that they did. Like I said, common misconception. It's instead just something where, instead of it being kind of a signpost to perhaps some things that were going on, this feels very much like Blake is writing principally about himself. There's a lot of introspective lyricism, there's a lot of introspective writing, both on a musical and also on a lyrical scale, and really on a personal scale. This album shines forth, really showcasing that, which is sometimes a very difficult thing to scale, because you cannot necessarily give a score primarily to somebody's, own attempt to help themselves, I suppose, or their own attempt to really get up to the point where they finally decide that enough is enough. Musically and sonically speaking, though, this album feels like it suffers from a lot of repetition. There's a lot of repeated themes that you're going to hear from track to track on this disc, and it's one that starts very principally with a lot of the sounds sounding like they have very similar structure to them, and this is especially prevalent whenever you hear just the basic introductions of the tracks. Gone seems to be a lot of the variety, and this is something that's imposed just in, little parts here and there throughout the corners of the album, I suppose would be the best way to say. And it's something that doesn't happen nearly as much. The expansion and kind of the awe-inspiring, musical genius that perhaps we've heard on the prior albums of this group, especially during the black metal cycle and with Instinct Decay, for example, really seem to be just sort of missing from this disc. And once again, I really feel it's because this is an album that really has a very personal edge to it. It's something that has a very personal aspect to it, one that is almost like Blake's love affair to himself, not in an egomaniac fashion, but rather as one where he's trying to give himself the willpower, the wherewithal, and kind of convincing himself that enough's enough. The world we left behind, really, whenever you consider it, is almost very symbolic in a way, because the world we left behind constitutes a change. It constitutes something as being given up, being removed. One could even constitute that it's about space travel, leaving behind the world that you know, the Earth. But instead, this is one that feels very much like it's the world that he's leaving behind. Portions and parts of himself that he's trying to, really close the door behind him on, and really try to get to the next chapter in his life and hopefully make it there unscathed. Thus far he has, but of course nothing is ever certain in this world. So for that, I have to say that even though the musical content encased within is not necessarily the greatest monumental, achievement in Nachtmystium's career, I have to give Blake high praise for actually opening himself up to that level of vulnerability, opening himself to that level of potential scrutiny for the work that was encased within this album. And it really just feels like he wrote this album for himself and for his fans. It was meant to be a farewell, but instead it turned into an album that could potentially lead him down the road to continuing with his music career, and continuing with it perhaps clean and sober. So this is a strange little signpost of life. This is a strange etching in the wall of not only Blake Judd's personal career and personal life, but perhaps the personal career and personal life of this band. This is an album that's going to be lauded by a lot. It's going to be one that's going to be heavily and heartily scrutinized for perhaps a lacking of creative vision, and one that's certainly going to suffer a lot of perhaps very contrived scoring, either that or contrived reviewing, based around the fact that this idea of being vulnerable and open like that is not heartily accepted. I'm instead going to take a different turn with this. While this is not an album that necessarily blew me away, this is one that, lyrically, whenever I listened to it, I definitely heard somebody's cry for help. Somebody who is really trying to describe exactly what they were going through, perhaps on a day-to-day basis. In fact, perhaps is not even a word I would use. Instead, it is the day-to-day life. So this is an album that, while musically speaking, is kind of rough around the edges, it's one that is very lyrically strong, and for anybody who's ever encountered any sort of problem, any sort of struggle, it is very relatable. So, I'm towing the line here. This is one that I'm going to give a 67 out of 100. And really, this is an album that does have its shining moments, such as In the Absence of Existence. Man, that's a really, really solid track right there. And it's one that actually encouraged me to do some writing on my own. I always like tracks that are able to really do that. That the minute that I hear it, and then I'm encouraged to re-listen to it, and then it inspires me. That to me really not only shows a well-tailored track for myself personally, but also showcases that this is still a band and this is still a songwriter who is capable of inspiring other people to pick up the pen or pick up a guitar. And there's a part there that really is important. But what did you guys think about this album? I'm really thinking this is going to be all over the place. I think some people are going to hail this as genius and other people are going to think it's utter crap, but what did you think? Let me know in the comments below. So, what world are we leaving behind today? And what world are we emerging to find tomorrow? I guess we're the ones that have to decide, and considering this review is being done around midnight on a day, it's about to fucking, show itself. Or something. Fuck it.